Hi, I'm Keith Williams, and I'm an Anthropology and American Studies major at the University of California at Davis. Right now, I want to talk to you about cultural hegemony and media representation. The British new wave band, Depeche Mode, once asked a long time ago, "People are people, so why should it be you and I should get along so awfully?" To put a finer point on it, why are some groups and their ideas more valued than other groups in a society? And how are these dominant groups able to make their power and influence become the widely adopted cultural common sense? One person who formulated a theory in the late 1920s and early 1930s was an Italian Marxist theorist, politician, and one-time leader of the Communist Party of Italy named Antonio Gramsci. While imprisoned by the fascist government of Benito Mussolini, Gramsci wrote what became the Prison Notebooks. In the Prison Notebooks, Gramsci refined a term to describe why he believed capitalist societies were more resilient than others. Gramsci sought to answer why Marx's description of the capitalist feedback loop of base and superstructure prospered in spite of the disadvantages it imposed on the working majority, while Marxism, with its emphasis on the working class, floundered. He reasoned that the reason was cultural hegemony, and he wondered how this power worked. Hegemony, derived from the Greek word hegemon, or leader, is defined as the social, cultural, ideological, or economic influence exerted by a dominant group. Raymond Williams wrote that Gramsci distinguished between cultural hegemony and typical structured rule by force when he wrote, "Rule is expressed in directly political forms, and in times of crisis by direct or effective coercion. But the more normal situation is a complex interlocking of political, social, and cultural forces. And hegemony, according to different interpretations, is either this or the active social and cultural forces which are its necessary elements." Cultural hegemony, in a more specific sense, are the interlocking narratives that the dominant class of a society produces to persuade the subordinate class of a world where the privileges and advantages of the dominant class are morally correct and a natural order of life. It is the rules, beliefs, myths, and traditions that provide the structure of the foundations of the dominant class to rule with little to moderate challenges. It is the mission statement and the blueprint where the culture breeds its common sense. Raymond Williams writes, "A dominant class has its ideology in relatively pure and simple forms. A subordinate class has, in one version, nothing but this ideology as its consciousness, since the production of all ideas is, by axiomatic definition, in the hands of those who control the primary means of production, or, in another version, has its ideology imposed on its otherwise different consciousness, which it must struggle to sustain or develop against ruling class ideology." So, what does this look and sound like in the real world? In 2014, right after the shooting death of armed black teenager Michael Brown, Huffington Post writer Nick Wing wrote an article that compared and contrasted the media treatment of white suspects that committed crimes versus black individuals who were victims of crimes that were committed against them. Through the display of numerous headlines, Mr. Wing displayed, even in the face of committing the most heinous of crimes, criminal acts by whites were shown to be an aberration of an overall presumed righteous character of white people, whereas the victimization of blacks was portrayed in line with established white hegemonic notions that blacks deserved their dire fates because black bodies have been defined as inherently diseased, immoral, subhuman, and expendable. George Lipsitz wrote in The Possessive Investment in Whiteness that these signifying displays are par for the American course when he wrote, "Conscious and deliberate actions have institutionalized group identity in the United States, not just through the dissemination of cultural stories, but also through systematic efforts from colonial times to the present to create economic advantages through a possessive investment in whiteness for European Americans." Alice Eve Weinbaum, in Nation, from Keywords for American Cultural Studies, concurs with Lipsitz that white European American hegemony limits the agency of African Americans and other marginalized groups in America when she expressed, "Ideas of race and racist ideologies continue to subtend the expression of nationalism in the United States. which is unsurprising given that the founding and consolidation of the nation was pursued as a project of racial nationalism that aggregated full belonging, if not citizenship, to whites or, in 19th century parlance, to people of Anglo-Saxon descent. Cultural hegemony is dynamic in that it responds to time and context of culture through the dominant class always having to convince the subordinate class of what is in their best interest. It's not universal because beliefs are continually contested from countercultural groups within society seeking to replace the ideas and beliefs of the dominant class. Think of groups like Black Lives Matter and unions. And cultural hegemony is not adopted suddenly. It diffuses slowly over time through many forms. Remember this? Or how about this? In all of this, it can be realized that the power by dominant players doesn't simply rely on force alone. It needs very good stories behind it.